So I think before the sit, we'll just
The first thing we
launch
should
the
perhaps do is just clarify. I don't know, we both heard you say a little book of memories. It's not, I have to say, it's not the little book of memories, it is the little book of memories that we're launching here. The little book of memories is following later. It's more of an evening event. We thought.
So you want to?
Let's open the book. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, here we go.
William, come on, you have to be all
Go on, I will do. Yep.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Hey! Big book of memories. This is the big book of memories. That's the book of big memories.
At least it started on the right foot. Thank you. We can do this later.
So JJ, obviously the world knows you as a designer,
Yes.
not as an author or a photographer. How long has photography been gestating behind the scenes here?
Well, actually, pretty much from the time I started dabbling in fashion, so 25 years.
And have you been photographing your creations and your shows and things in a serious manner?
Not so serious, but in 2011 is when I switched over to fine art photography, and I started showing my photographs in galleries. But it's a long gap between gallery shows.
Sure.
So.
And up to then, let's get technical. What were you using 35mm DSLRs, or what were you up to?
So the thing is that I'm not a trained photographer. As long as I get great pictures from a great piece of equipment, that works. But this book is really not about DSLRs. It's about being in the moment and creating images, even when you travel, and using the most important camera in our lives, which is our phone.
When did you realize, obviously anyone that's had a phone has been using their camera on it since camera phones started to be more, the results started to be more wonderful 5 or 6 years ago.
You being one of them.
I've also, I had a very fancy contacts, the first expensive thing I ever bought as a teenager.
Right.
When I won a prize, I went and bought a contacts. And that was an extra part of my body for 5 years. I was very, very keen on photography, and I never quite believed that I would be able to just surrender to the simplicity of an instant camera. But it does give you a kind of guerrilla quality to your photographs, I find.
Yes, I think the important thing is because we are going digital, and the whole concept of actually seeing photographs and keeping the memories alive is alien to most. Most images get lost in the gigabytes in the phone. So my whole idea was to really create something where these can be made timeless, and they're there for everybody to collect and actually savor through the years. So that's the whole idea of really putting this together. But
when Cartier-Bresson revolutionized photography in the 40s and 50s, he and quite a lot of the other most remarkable photographers of that period were not using big format Hasselblads and the heavy equipment with tripods and so on that was then regarded as serious photography.
Yeah.
He broke the mold by using the tiny Leica.
Correct.
Which is about no bigger than a modern phone camera.
Right.
And exactly what he liked about it was its invisibility. The fact that he could hide it under a jacket, that the shutter was famously silent, so there was no loud click.
Yeah.
No one knew that you were being photographed. And so he and quite a lot of the war photographers, early war photographers like Robert Capa, used the Leica as a way of grabbing shots, catching stuff that they otherwise wouldn't. And they were happy to sacrifice some of the quality that you got with a Hasselblad or a large format camera for the instant guerrilla quality. Is that what appealed to you about using a phone camera and jettisoning all your expensive equipment?
Yeah. Well, actually, Henri Cartier-Bresson spoke about this whole experience as the decisive moment. I mean, that was his most prolific sort of quote. And I think that's very true, because if you have something which is not in people's faces and you catch it in that moment never comes back. It's present there. So can you immortalize it for good? And I think that's really what we managed to achieve with the kind of equipment we're carrying around now.
Do you still use your big cameras, or are they locked away in a cupboard with dust growing on top of them?
Oh, no. For my fine art shows, yes, because I've got to blow up prints to a much larger scale. I have to go that way.
And that, of course, is ultimately the big drawback still with these phone cameras, is that you can't really do more than about 2 feet by 3 feet.
Maximum if you push it,
And even that's quite grainy.
Yeah, but this is not so much about equipment. I mean, photography actually has never been about equipment. It's about what you observe, what you see, what you want, what you see. Everybody sees the same frame. What do you see in it, which is different? And suddenly, for example, the books are on cities at the moment. So everybody's been to Istanbul and Goa, but what can I see which is unseen, and how do I extract it? And the easiest way to do it is using a phone which is with you all the time. So,
do you think that there's anything? I mean, your work as a designer is very much, you have a house style, people can recognize your work straight off.
Right.
But do you think that's true of your photography yet?
I think for my fine art photography, yes. To a large extent, I dabble in portraiture and architectural photography. So a lot of people are associating with it. Some serious collectors have picked up the work, so I think that's a good indication by any standards. I'm working on my third show, which is meant to be a third show, a fine art show. Which is meant to be a large-scale show. So yes, there is a distinct signature. I can't sort of separate my avatar as a designer from that as a photographer. Or, the creativity pretty much runs through.
But you also draw a distinction, which is interesting, between what you call your fine art photography and this work.
Yes.
This isn't fine art photography.
Not at all.
Explain that. I like to think
the beauty,
inherently a camera picture can be
true.
As fine a thing as something taken on a different piece of equipment.
Absolutely, but in my definition, when I talk of fine art photography, the basic difference is that this is unstaged. It happens in the spur of the moment. Whereas when I dabble in my other photography, I'm staging things and creating context and creating a story. I'm more of a storyteller there. Here, I'm an observer, a spectator, and just sort of extracting.
And so is the fine art photography done with the heavy equipment, is that very much premeditated?
Yes.
And
and
lighting
no.
and...
Yes and no, because you can think all you want, but everything changes when you're actually making the image happen. And I don't really believe in planning things. It happens as we go along. The idea is to create an image which people can look at and keep revisiting, and I think we pretty much managed to achieve
Who
that.
are your gods photographically? Whose work have you looked at, and what influences do you see creeping into your work?
Well, Bresson for sure.
Yeah, I'm a big fan too. Yeah.
Undoubtedly, he's been.
And Bresson in India, in particular, extraordinary.
Yes,
some of the most extraordinary.
Yes.
He was only here for whatever it was, 6 months, 7 months.
Yeah. But I mean, all his work is phenomenal. So yes, to a large extent. I'm not. I mean, I don't claim to be a great fashion photographer. I always think I'm much better friends who do better work. But Ansel Adams, otherwise. It could be another person who...
We seem to have the same pantheon of deities. Yeah,
and if I think about India, well, Prabhupada was brilliant in his photography, and I still think that he's the finest fashion photographer, or landscape for that matter.
Of his work, did you like the nudes or the landscapes or the Goa book?
I think I liked his guts to do a book called Women at a time when everything was, sort of... and I remember talking to him, and I said, what do you think I should do? And he said, well, it's all about I don't want to use the word, but it's all about how, gutsy you and your publisher are. So go take the risk, do it, it's all right, it'll be worth it. So it was fun.
I worked with him on the Goa book, and I wrote the text for, what was it called? Edge of...
but I know the book.
And that, in a sense, is his most surprising book, because it was the least stylish. It was very observational.
Yes.
And unlike Women, and unlike the Ladakh book, which is quite stagey and quite sort of dramatic, it's very much an attempt to get into the mood of Goa.
It's also the evolution of photographer.
Edge of Faith, it's called.
That's true. Yeah, but it was Goa as he saw it, and his strength was always black and whites and playing with light and shade. But also his trajectory, he went through a whole sort of thing and finally came to this calm about himself and created that beautiful book of imagery. I mean, brilliant photographer.
So this book, this Goan book, tell me about the creation of that. Did you look at Prabhuda's Goa pictures before?
No, I've seen the book, but it has no, I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, but no inspiration or bearing from that book. So this is shot more as a traveler. I mean, it's not meant to be, you know, sending deep messages or something. It's a simple book of what do you see when you travel and how do you retain it with yourself, within yourself, and probably for others, you know, over a period of time. So this is really a...
So explain the title, The Little Book of Memories.
Well, it's little, as you can see, it's a small book. It's nothing like that. And it's memories, so the two kind of came together because I've always felt that we go to places and the images just get lost. So with it, and images do speak 1,000 words, and why not? Why can't I create something which is handy? People can look at it, people can feel for it, and people can actually collect. So in this lifetime, I hope to do an entire series of it. And of course, one of the main...
So it's an ongoing series. This
Yes.
is something you're going to be doing...
At least 2 a year, yes.
Yeah. And so tell about the two locations. First of all, Istanbul. What does Istanbul mean to you? How have you ended up there?
I think it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I mean, of course, that's probably the most cliched statement, and everybody will say that. But
it
also,
is.
it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a reality, and also the culturalism, multiculturalism that exists, and there are many sides of it. So the way I make images, is not to go to the touristy spots. So that's the first thing I don't want to do. And even if I do, I go from a completely different, frame of mind, and then try and create images which sort of look familiar but look absolutely new. And I think that's the most important part of creating imagery because. A
lot of it, black and white is obviously important to you.
I like black and white, but Goa is all about color. Istanbul was mainly black and white.
So talk about Istanbul first of all.
If I could talk, I wouldn't have taken images. So my belief is that my world is visual, and that's really how I convey everything that I think about. In fact, I often tell a lot of my artist friends that don't like spiels about your work. Just write a small paragraph and leave it to people. Let them interpret it. Hate it, love it. Can't please everybody, but let them sort of interpret it. So therefore, there's hardly any text in the book. So literature festival, but no words.
But you decided to go on in black and white. Was that a homage to photographers like Bresson? Were you, and was there something about the city which you think particularly lent itself to?
No, I think it's a push away from reality. When you go to any place, well, this is what we see. Look at this color. There's color all around, blue, ochre. And now if somebody had to suddenly transform this and create a world which is monochromatic, it's not how we see the world, but how I can project the world. So you see a newness, which is refreshing, and that's really one of the main reasons. Also the depth, black and white definitely creates a dimension which is, extremely...
But it also has a kind of auto vintage sort of quality to it. Look at today when we're so used to color images. There is a sort of feeling of sort of something, particularly Istanbul, which has that sort of still something 1930s or 1920s about it.
Yeah.
And your photographs evoke that very beautifully.
I really feel like asking you questions now, because you've been doing some great work with architectural black and white photography. So yeah, no, I don't. The vintage to me is, well, it's an important part of my life, because one part of me lives in the past and dwells there and enjoys it, but I am a modern creator, and therefore I have to blend both sensibilities into, a strong statement. So when I don't essentially enjoy shooting very modern spaces. So they have to have something cutting edge, something historic in them, and blend it with something modern to come out with a new thing. So yeah, black and white for me essentially isn't vintage, but it's more about a stark statement and a push away from reality.
Again, a technical question. Are you editing on your phone, or are you taking it to your computer?
Yeah, so this is the amazing part. They're shot, worked on, and shipped straight to the printer. They never go on the system. So
what do you use, Snapseed or?
I prefer not to use filters because they can actually, they get some funny effects which don't really work well. So I really work with the controls which are inherent to the camera and keep it as basic as possible.
But you choose black and white as a, yeah.
Depends,
yeah.
Really.
I certainly, I grew up processing my own black and white in the school darkroom. And a lot of my teenage years were spent in the darkroom when everyone else was going out, partying away. I would be there quite late at night often in that safe light, with an enlarger, stinking of fixer, with developer all over me, and at the end of it would come out with these 10 by 8 crisp prints, which I was enormously proud of. And I think partly it's the ability just to do all that again without actually having to go into a dark room, without having to get fixer all over your clothes and stinking of it. I felt very much that it was sort of a return to a kind of photography that I had done as a teacher, and that was very much inspired by the photographers I loved at that period. People like, in landscape work, not well known in India, Faye Godwin, who's an extraordinary English landscape photographer who worked a lot with poets like Ted Hughes and a very literary landscape photographer. But particularly Bill Brandt, who's an extraordinary, dark, complicated man who produced these dark, complicated images, sometimes portraits of writers and poets looking utterly miserable in bleak industrial landscapes.
Yeah, well, funny that you say that, because the next show I'm working on and the introduction letter I sent to all my subjects, the 24 of them, was that I'm going to push you back in time. I'm not going to make you look like the way you do. You may not look pretty, so if you really want to do this and you want to look great and beautiful, then don't do this. That was the first thing I said. Because I think...
brave models taking it on.
Well, actually, all of them have been very brave, and all ended up looking fantastic.
And the next project, the one we're celebrating, the Goa book, utterly different from the Istanbul book in many ways. Color.
Yes, color and very little beaches, because you would imagine when you go to Goa, it's all about the water. But there's so much of Goa which is, people either think of the beaches or they think of the real Goa, which is the Goanese culture and the villages and everything. But there's a world which exists in between, and which is actually influenced by a lot of different cultures of people who come there. So graffitis on the wall, textures which have been created, reggae parties happening which nobody knew of. It's a completely different world. So I kind of like to exist. I try to discover that unknown.
And is it the Portuguese Goa that you're after, or is it the expat sort of Russian?
It's a bit of everything. Why I don't like playing favorites, and that's what makes Goa what it is. It's got Portugal, sitting where it is, but then this whole new sort of energy of different kinds.
So again, black and white often means nostalgia, but this, as a color book, is a Goa, a very contemporary Goa.
But with a Goanese palette, so even the cover or the colors inside will distinctly feel. Now that's the designer and me speaking, because I pick up color sensibilities very quickly. And so if I do a city in color, it would have a distinct palette. You can actually hold the book against the city and you literally feel it belongs there.
And you've made a decision that these are not going to be so much on general release as available for fundraising.
Yes,
talk about that.
Yeah, that's where I want to take these, and I hope I succeed, because I think there's an opportunity here to actually do something which can help a lot of very serious causes. And it's a little small way if I can manage, but I think it's a brilliant format for people to actually use to raise funds. And eventually I think that's the path these books are going to take.
So what's the project? Where's it going to go towards? Do you have a particular...
I told you I hate planning. I'll walk my path.
So we have here, I think this is the moment where we have to unveil this beautiful thing. Any photographers present just to record this moment? We have our... No. You've brought an unphotographed book of photographs.
There we go. Photographs? Again? So that's the palette that I made. There we are.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.J. Valyer's little book of, I'm about to say memories again, memories. Thank you. Big round of applause. You will be signing. There are 20 copies available for sale, apparently. These will be collector's items. So rush and to the bookshop, and JJ will be happy to sign.
Thank you, William, and thank you, JJ, for doing this little book. So 2 little books, and we look forward to many more little books in the future. Thank you for being here. and congratulations.
Main unclaimed. Thank you.